Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, he is.
Yeah, they told me to send it.
Hi, Alex.
You know what, let's just get started.
Hello there.
It's 3:00.
He's there, but we can't hear him.
You can't hear me?
That barely. We'll have to.
Oh,
There you are.
Where's the camera?
He's there, but his voice is very loud.
yeah, I'm not, I mean, I have a microphone. Is that something you can turn up on your end, or should I just use a lot of hand gestures?
What? Oh. Quiet.
At elementary school, people talk
That
about
was the ears up, mouth closed.
Oh my God, nobody told
I
me
learned that
part.
today. I learned that
That's even
yesterday
better.
here. Yeah.
Oh, I like it.
Ears up, mouth closed.
Okay, so we're gonna get started. And I'm not first, Vicky is first.
Who is first?
Vicky told her
I'm
Burton.
Okay,
Burton is
so-
first. So we're going Burton and then Monty Waringly and then Colette. Okay, going in alphabetical order. So.
Oh, yeah. I thought you were gonna say something.
No, I'm just gonna get us started. So welcome to our session. Award-winning writers look back. Could you just hold that thought?
Alex, can you see him? Can you see us?
Yeah, I can see and I can hear whenever the microphone picks it up, which is a solid 2/3 of the sentences Sarah said so far.
This is the correct one? Is it fine?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. You can start. And this is the speaker. It's a fine, just
Okay,
Maybe
and what
here.
about changing? How do I
You can
advance the
use
slide?
the
Is it,
arrow
okay,
key.
good. That's what I prefer. Okay, good.
Okay.
All right.
So welcome to award-winning writers who look back on WAC. Lessons for our current and future programs. We're going to be started off as Professor Emerita and Emerita Director of the WIC program at Oregon State, Vicky Toller-Burton.
Thank you for coming. It's nice to see everyone. And Sarah said we're supposed to introduce ourselves. I'm Vicky Toller-Burton. I'm Emerita English professor at Oregon State University, happily retired and happily back at the IWAC conference. So good on both sides. And I should warn you that I am not only a retired WAC person, but I'm a historian of rhetoric. And so if you hear that creeping in a little bit, just forewarned, you'll get through it. It's not that bad. Okay, so let's get going. Oregon State's Writing Intensive Curriculum Program began publicly celebrating undergraduate writing in the disciplines in 2006, when the program, locally known as WIC, invited faculty teaching writing intensive courses in the major to select the top undergraduate writer in the major to receive the WIC Culture of Writing Award in that discipline. The award carries a modest monetary award from WIC matched by the major unit, a certificate of accomplishment, an invitation to submit the winning paper to the university library's online scholar archive, which gives them a link they can use going forward for job applications, and the opportunity to cite this award for writing excellence on resumes and CV. They are also publicized within the university. Faculty in all 70 majors are invited to identify awardees in their courses, with faculty in about 25 majors a year choosing to make the award. The term culture of writing is in common circulation now, but at the time our awards began, the term had been little used in publication. And I'm actually not sure where I picked it up from, but I did some post research and there's really only one or two mentions that I could find. So writing awards have historical roots in ceremonial discourse of ancient Greece. Here we go. Specifically in epideictic rhetoric of praise. Classical rhetoric of epideictic discourse, so named by Aristotle, included eulogy honoring the dead, panegyric in praise of festival or event, and encomium, extolling the excellent qualities of an individual. As George Kennedy points out in his introduction to Aristotle's rhetoric, in epideictic, the speaker exalts values and seeks resonance with the audience. Thus, the purpose of or telos of the speech is to persuade the audience to admire certain values. In the case of writing awards in the disciplines, the values being honored are not generic qualities of good writing, but rather specific characteristics and values of excellent writing in that discipline or field. Historic threads of writing awards, of course, include feminist historical accounts of 19th century US women's clubs and school societies that promoted the practice and excellence in women's writing and speaking in a gender-safe environment. See Anne Ruggles-Geer, Jacqueline Jones-Royster, Nan Johnson, Suzanne Bordelon, and others. Excellent writing by scholars is honored in virtually every field, with best article honors awarded by scholarly journals across the curriculum. Writing awards not only recognize past accomplishment, but also serve as academic capital. Designing and teaching a framework of disciplinary writing for a university of over 27,000 undergraduates, all of whom have to take a writing intensive course, can feel like shooting arrows into the future without knowing which arrows, if any, find their target. Are we sending our graduates out with the right writing arrows? Are there essential arrows we did not include? As a way of bringing student voices to our 25th anniversary celebration, we wondered if we could locate past winners of the Culture of Writing Awards. And if we found them, would they tell us about writing in their professional and personal lives now? Of 250 plus awardees, we were able to obtain current email addresses for almost all of them. Amazing. Nearly 92 of 250 responded to our survey, with 70 fully completing all questions in a timely manner. Of those respondents, more than 50 said they would be willing to be interviewed in depth about their current writing practices. We were both astounded by and deeply grateful to these respondents. Since the survey was for programmatic use for the celebration, we did not submit it to IRB approval as a research project. I share these results with you informally as part of a programmatic endeavor and as context for the study, which Alex will discuss, and Sarah. We hope to learn how some of our alumni represent themselves as writers in the world. Where do they dwell as writers now, and what is their ethos as members of their discipline? I adapt this question and concept from historian of rhetoric, Michael Hyde, who notes a meaning of ethos that predates its meaning as moral character and ethics. Rather, he says, the ethos of rhetoric refers to the way discourse is used to transform space and time into dwelling places where people can deliberate and know together some matter of interest. Such dwelling places define the grounds, the abodes or habitats where a person's ethics and moral character take form and develop. As I have argued elsewhere, undergraduates develop the ethos of their field of study by dwelling in the content and discourse of the major. Elements of a professional or disciplinary ethos may include content expertise, application of relevant knowledge and skills, knowledge and commitment to the ethics of the field, and of interest to us, the ability to communicate in writing and orally using the practices and conventions of the discipline. We wanted to learn how our graduates use writing as they dwell in their lives. Okay. I'll begin with the question about the genres they most often or frequently used for work. So this was the question: what types or genres of writing do you regularly use in your work? And then we gave some examples. Not surprisingly, the most frequently mentioned workplace genre was email. Some confirmed that email, in fact, is their most frequent writing task. What a shock. Having reviewed the syllabi of all 150 plus WIC courses, I can say with some confidence that email is largely neglected as a genre taught in the majors. So it is not surprising that a number of survey respondents reported feeling unprepared for writing professional emails, and especially writing those with high stakes. They just didn't know. They mentioned struggling with levels of formality, with tone, with writing to higher executives in their organization, all of which are related to audience, and Sarah's going to say more about that. Some pointed out being unprepared for the impact one email can have on one professionally. And we can all imagine. The next most frequently mentioned workplace genre was the report. The subgenres of reports mentioned were technical reports, lab reports, funding reports, progress reports, medical, building, and reports on storm drainage. That was one example. No respondents mentioned a lack of training in report writing. Several said that each workplace has its own report format and requirements, so implicitly writers may have enough training in report writing to adapt to their workplace expectations. The third most frequently mentioned genre, did we go to slide? Wait a minute, I think okay. The third most frequently mentioned genre was proposals, including grant proposals, project proposals, business proposals, and others. A number of graduates lamented that grant writing was absent from their writing training at OSU and suggested that it be added. Those working in health fields and other service professions were especially impacted by this lack in training, though I know 2 health-related majors that do require all students to write grant proposals, and one respondent actually confessed, who complained about not being able to write it. He said, I actually took the course in how to write a grant proposal, but I didn't think it was important. And now he said, now I get it. So some workplace genres, and I'm going back to slide 3. Some workplace genres, like academic publications and lesson plans, are well represented in the syllabi of writing intensive courses. However, social media posts as a workplace writing genre are rarely included, nor is consideration of social media's potential impact on an individual's career identity. A number of respondents mentioned struggling with writing evaluations of employees they supervise, which I thought was interesting. This suggests that even if graduates are well prepared to write at entry-level positions, they may not be prepared for some types of writing required as their careers advance. Respondents struggle with how to compose feedback to employees on their work performance or their writing. One veterinarian said his employees' written reports were not clear or complete enough for another doctor to come in and understand, but the vet was unsure how to give them helpful feedback. Let's see here. From writing, we turn to aspects and practices of writing. We hoped the survey would give us insight into which elements of the OSU writing intensive learning outcomes graduates are actually using in the workplace. So we formed a question around that. But we didn't say that was the learning outcomes. We just said, do you do any of these things in the workplace? So these outcomes, which you see here, must be included and assessed in each writing intensive course in every major. And instead of reading these to you, I'm going to gloss them and tell you sort of how we think of them and refer to them. The first outcome we refer to as the writing to learn outcome, which requires students to use both informal, ungraded or minimally graded writing and formal writing to learn course content. The second outcome assures that students learn to focus each document on purpose, genre, and possible audiences. The third outcome requires students to engage in an iterative writing process for a major assignment of at least 2,000 words. Students must draft the full paper, receive extensive feedback, peer and instructor, and robustly revise the draft. One question we asked them about the uses of these writing practices in their current work. And here is the report. Okay, 97%, as the slide indicates, writing with strong, accurate content, editing for sentence level correctness, and writing with your audience in mind were all used by more than 90% of the graduates in their workplace writing, closely followed by organizing ideas and, let's see, proofreading, yes. With organizing your ideas and proofreading. Nearly more than 80% of the writers reported revising for global issues, as well as giving and receiving feedback on their workplace writing. Nearly 3/4 of the writers do some sort of pre-writing, like brainstorming or planning. They mentioned various things which we recognize as pre-writing. And a similar number draft documents before releasing a final copy. Slightly over half of writers participate in some sort of collaborative writing in their work. These results suggest that there is considerable transfer of learning from OSU outcomes for writing intensive courses to workplace writing. As a general cross-check, graduates were asked, how well did your OSU education and experience prepare you for writing in your career? 49% said they were very well prepared. 48% they said they were well prepared, adequately prepared, 3%, and nobody said they were hopelessly unprepared. There's much public discussion about whether college graduates actually work in the fields in which they majored. And this one actually surprised me that 73% of our respondents are actually working in a field closely related to their major. And then another 20% are working in a field somewhat related to their major. So that's 93% of them are actually out there doing the work that they were prepared to do at Oregon State. And a number mentioned, some of the 7 said little or not related, and they had just switched fields. They just realized they were in the wrong thing. Okay. We also asked about genres of writing students use in their personal or community lives outside of work. And we asked not for curricular reasons. The others, obviously, we were looking at our curriculum to see what they would say. And then we asked because we believe writing contributes to a full, rich life. So we asked, what types of writing do you do frequently in your community and personal life? So again, 74% email. I was surprised that only 50%, 54% said they use text messages. Does that surprise anybody else? I thought everybody texted. Oh, well, even I text. Okay. Journal writing, even though it's only 39%, that seemed high for me. And so that sort of surprised me. And over a quarter of them still write personal letters. How about that? I mean, really, who are these people? And then social media, Facebook, etc., 20% only. Blogs, 14%, and about 6% none in A. It's too much work. And then, as one respondent said, sometimes I write postcards. I love that. I love that. Finally, we asked, is there anything you'd like to add related to writing? There it is. Related to writing or the 25th anniversary celebration of WIC at OSU. Many respondents wrote, they wrote so much more than we expected in response to this open-ended question after a quite long survey. And to conclude, here are 3 excerpts from the College of Ag Sciences. Oops, what happened? Let's see. All right, okay, I'm just going to read it. We're moving on. Happy Yancey inspires me. Moving on. Thank you. From the College of Ag Sciences, thank you, OSU, for helping me to become a published science writer. OSU was the best foundation I could have had or hoped for. And from that foundation, I've been able to put together a slightly odd and highly satisfying career, spreading the joy of birds and birding to a wide audience. And he's not kidding. He's big time. Okay, from the College of Engineering, WIC is as important as STEM-related coursework in engineering. Beats still my heart. Most students will spend a relatively small portion of their career performing technical calculations. They will spend a significantly larger portion of their career communicating with peers or reviewing and revising the work of employees they supervise. And the last word goes to a student from the College of Liberal Arts. I started as a graphic design major and switched to ethnic studies. The encouragement from my professors truly helped me reframe how I saw myself and my ideas. When Dr. Barn presented me with the WIC Award, I actually cried because still in my senior year, I wasn't terribly confident in my writing. The award spoke to my skills and it validated all the work I had put into my classes. I'm welling up just writing about it. To every professor at OSU, your words of encouragement, validation, and affirmation go such a long way. Thank you. Okay. See, I have to get around here without.
Alexander Mossy-Lee, who is actually zooming in from Morocco, and where it is dark 100 hours. Is there anything in the community who started yours on the past project?
So Josie, Dr. Walwina is helping distribute them. Oh, sorry, I didn't have the microphone. Alex, I should have arranged this beforehand. Do you want me to just wave vigorously a 2-minute warning?
I would love to get a 2-minute warning. If you just wave it, I'm not sure I will see it because when sharing slides, you get very small.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. just say
Okay,
that-
I'll just say 2 minutes when 2 minutes comes around.
I would very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, so take it away, Alex.
All right. Sarah, I heard you giving a bit of an introduction, so I hope I don't too much. I didn't hear exactly what you said, but I'm Alexander Wordley. I was involved with this project during my graduate education at Oregon State. And since then, I left to work at Al Akhawain University in Ifran in Morocco, which is where I am today. Is it okay if I just share a screen here? I want to make sure you all see this so I don't gesture towards it that's not there. How does this look?
Okay, we're seeing it.
We're seeing, yep.
Perfect.
Cool. Thank you kindly. And if at any point you're having trouble hearing me or following what I'm doing, I hope someone will get my attention so that it doesn't go for naught. Again, I was involved with this project during graduate education, specifically with the interview series. As the survey was done before I joined Oregon State, and I worked on the interview series while I was there. So that's what I'll focus on during this session. I want to begin by talking about how we generated the interview project. Following on what Vicky said, we had this survey data and all these interesting responses from a variety of willing participants. Questions in the survey asked about both participants, descriptions, reflections on their writing and professional practices, and also their education at Oregon State University, such as question 14, which I have here. And this is the same question and responses that Vicky shared earlier, just organized by number of gross respondents who indicated they use that aspect of writing instead of by percentile. Seeing that writers use these different steps is very interesting, but we wanted to go a little bit further in depth to see not only which aspects they used, but how they used these different aspects and at what point in the writing process they did so. Fortunately, because of the question which asked who would be willing to participate in a follow-up interview, we had a ready-made interview pool. Folks have already said that they were willing to speak a little bit further on their writing practices. This was not just any pool of writers, though, because the Culture of Writing Award is selected by disciplinary faculty without involvement from the Writing Intensive Curriculum program. And those faculty are intimately familiar with their disciplinary ways of knowing and writing. We can use the winners of the Culture of Writing Award as stand-ins for experts in professional writing across a variety of fields. Additionally, writing in the discipline's courses have previously been connected to pre-professional identity formation. Writing courses in the major are often sites where students start seeing themselves as practitioners in their various fields. And so we were curious not only to get a more in-depth look at those survey responses, but also, again, to see how our WIC learning outcomes transferred in participants' descriptions of their professional writing. With these questions in mind, we generated a couple overarching or guiding questions. We were curious as to professional writers across the disciplines first displayed genre awareness, second, described their composing processes or practices, and third, demonstrated transfer of the WIC learning outcomes in their responses. We selected one participant from each of the different colleges, which had respondents say they were willing to participate in an interview. Those would be the colleges of science, engineering, agricultural sciences, public health and human science, and then 2 participants from the College of Liberal Arts. And our thinking there was to choose one student who had won the award in a humanities course and one who had won the award in a social sciences course. We generated interview questions in relationship to the WIC outcome. So, for example, the second WIC outcome asks students to demonstrate knowledge and understanding of audience expectations, genres, and conventions. One of the interview questions paired with this outcome was, in your current work, what types or genres of writing do you produce, and who are the audiences for these different genres? And if you'd be interested in seeing the rest of the questions, I'd be happy to show them in the Q&A session. Ultimately, after obtaining IRB approval, I conducted the 6 interviews in May and June of 2021 and subsequently transcribed, anonymized, and analyzed those interviews using applied thematic analysis, which is a mixed methodology for analyzing qualitative data sets such as interview transcripts. Initially, I had a set of codes derived from the WIC outcomes. So trying to code what participants reference to kind of knowledge, it could be trends, WIC outcomes, just to organize responses thematically. And subsequently, I added some subcategories to try and represent the patterns I'm seeing. I'm going to focus for the rest of this session on subcode 2.2 and code 3.0 with its various subcodes. Reproducing representative example interview transcripts where it's applicable. Beginning with code 2.2, this is related to genre and genres, where participants demonstrated different kinds of genre awareness in their descriptions of their workplace writing. The subcategories for this larger category I derived from Christine Tardy's 4 components of genre knowledge. Those are formal, process, rhetorical, and subject matter knowledge. Formal genre knowledge is related to features and conventions of genres that will be used in a discipline or field. And that's really similar to the way that our WIC outcome talks about conventions. So I opted to preserve the language of the WIC outcome, since I used that to generate the codes, in 2.3, and took the other 3 categories as subcategories. This distinction also helps thematically. While all these components of genre knowledge are interrelated, you can't have rhetorical knowledge about how a reader would use a feature without knowing the feature itself. In the past, process, rhetorical, and subject matter knowledge have been linked to more nuanced genre awareness in student writers. You could, for example, know the conventions of a genre without having a broader understanding of how they operate in context. If we're willing to accept this distinction, then most writers demonstrated a nuanced awareness of how texts they composed would circulate in the world, demonstrated by a mean of 4.5 of these different categories, 2.2, 0.1, 0.2, and 0.3, coded across the different interviews. We also saw recurring themes across the way these codes appeared. For example, participants 1, 3, 4, and 5, so 4 of the 6 participants, mentioned composing a single genre with multiple audiences in mind. 1, 3, and 4 cited multiple audiences, different epistemic levels, and how they would compose for those audiences. Participant 5 was more for time efficiency, different audiences at similar epistemic levels, but at different institutions. For an example of what one of these responses looked like, let's look at participant 3, Edna, who was a data scientist. When describing how she composed an article in Confluence, which she described as an internal company Wikipedia with comment, features, and for record keeping, she stated the following, and I'll read this out loud, but if you'd rather follow along quietly, obviously that's fine. I generally write those Confluence articles. Most of the times that I write are very technical. So the audience that they're geared towards are my peers. So not my boss's boss's boss type of people. But I do try to write them in a way that the most important information is either at the top or bolded. So if my boss's boss does say like, oh, I want to go look at this thing. What's the takeaway from all this research? Edna spent 3 months on this project. I want to know that, the money that we spent paying your salary earned a thing. There's a conclusion out of this. So I try to bubble that up to the top so you don't have to scroll. Here's the background, the overview of the project, and 1 or 2 sentences. And here's the big takeaway. And if you want to look at the details, then the rest of the page is sort of geared to my peers. It would be kind of the same knowledge level that I would be, or at least adjacent enough, they could figure out what I'm talking about. But at the top part, I try to gear it to all audiences. And since that's open to the whole company, anyone can read it. I don't always know who reads it, but it's at least a handy place that I can point people if they have questions. This was coded for both 2.1 audience expectations and 2.2.2, that is rhetorical knowledge as a component of subject matter. Because this participant points to both these different audiences that will be interacting with their document and also how they try to compose to meet the different purposes those audience will have as this text circulates in the world. Moving towards code 3 and its attendant subcodes, this was related to the 3rd WIC outcome, which dealt with the writing process and its various aspects, which you can see in the table on the right, just again, taken from the language of our WIC outcome. As they talked about the writing processes, participants 1 through 5 described relatively crystallized processes. That is, when I asked how they composed a certain genre, they would go through a set of steps, things that they usually did in a recurring fashion. Though they may change them based on certain context, it seems like they had a sort of general approach. All 6 of the writers who were interviewed began their accounts of the writing process with descriptions of how they gather sources, and is code 3.3 on the other side. For a look at what one of these responses looked like? Let's look at participant 4, who's an IT engineer. When asked how he composed a technical report, he began by saying, so I guess it kind of really starts with the problem statement. Let's say for simplicity, traffic is delayed 20 minutes at this signal during rush hour. So, start with a very simple problem statement, kind of going, what investigative research do we need to conduct to come up with a solution? So in that particular situation, we're going to hire a consultant that's an expert at, taking traffic counts and doing traffic modeling. I'm focusing on traffic, but it could be something like hiring a geotechnical engineer to investigate soils at a site, or an environmental engineer to see if there's sensitive resources at the project. So it's kind of identifying what the different factors are and what supplemental information we need to gather to provide a more informed impact to those different criteria. Subsequently, participant 4 went on to describe other steps of writing, things that they were doing with a document. But again, the fact that all 6 of the different writers began their accounts of the writing process by talking about sources, information specific to their disciplines is a nice reinforcement of the inherent connection between writing and content knowledge or subject matter expertise, which is emphasized in writing in the discipline's philosophy. Also of note, only participant 1, when she was referring to which she described as a genre not important to her professional success, and participant 6 recorded codes for discrete drafting in their writing processes. None of the 6 recorded codes for comprehensive revision in their descriptions of writing processes. And in fact, participants 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6, that's 5 of the 6 participants, explicitly resisted the language of drafting and revising when describing their writing processes. Now, I still think that drafting and revising are useful pedagogical practices as an instructor of writing, but to borrow from Vicky's language, you think about the arrows that we're sending writers into their profession writing with. It's interesting to see that all the participants resisted this language, discrete drafting and revising, since these are very common practices in different writing intensive courses. Now, codes 2 and 3, it makes sense that participants would have something to say along these lines, since our questions were specifically designed to get at those WAC outcomes. But perhaps more surprising was the co-occurrence between these two codes. Co-occurrence between codes 2 and 3 within a single response, so within a response to one question, occurred in 14 instances throughout the 6 interviews. Generally, co-occurrence occurred in descriptions of a writer's process, and 12 of those 14 instances featured codes 2.2.1, 0.2, or 0.3. These are the categories of genre awareness that we previously connected to more nuanced genre awareness. The fact that writers, and just for what this would look like, when asked about their writing process, writers or participants would describe what they do, and then immediately, without prompting, explain why they do it, generally with reference to audience expectations or how a text would circulate in the world. Suffice to say that expert writers have a solid understanding of not only what they are doing in their writing process, but also why they are doing it, and they will explain their choices with reference to those rhetorical considerations. The most frequent pairing of all was between specific subcodes 2.2.3, that is subject matter knowledge as a component of genre knowledge, and 3.5, that is giving or receiving feedback during the writing process, with 7 of the 14 total co-occurrences. When participants described giving or receiving feedback on in-progress compositions, and all 6 participants did, they generally described the feedback that they were giving or receiving as relating to an individual's expertise, subject matter knowledge, and or content, rather than related to the form or effectiveness of the writing. And again, for a look at what forms this took during interviews, let's look at an excerpt from participant 1's interview. Participant 1, a historian, works with an antique maps company. And she was describing communicating with her boss about the different map descriptions they would publish. I asked, it sounds like you work pretty closely with your boss, and a lot of this back and forth communication is direct with him. What's his background as a writer or authority? Participant 1 responded, sure, so he's a lawyer, a trained lawyer. Yeah, so I guess legal writing would be that. So he's excellent at drilling down to a point really quickly and trying to get to the essence of what is going to sell this map, because that is his business. So he's better at that, I would say, than I am, because as a historian, I like to put all the context. I want everyone to have all the context first, and then we may go forward with analysis. Here, participant 1 displays a keen awareness not only of the disciplinary backgrounds she and her boss have, but also the kinds of feedback these backgrounds predispose them to give to one another as they compose and also revise these texts. Along parallel lines, participant 5, who's a consultant for school, a health and safety consultant for schools in the county in Oregon, described a collaborative writing process, Bay County grant officer. She stated, and so long as it meets those standards, he writes the grant. Remove this face bubble. Of course, he doesn't hold all the information he needs. That's where I come in if I'm working with him. Later, I asked, does your help then usually come in providing specific and contextual information? And she interjected, yeah, it's usually, it could be background information on the entities. It's definitely program-based information. So if I'm designing the program, I have to provide what is the program? What are the goals? What would you be doing? How would you assess it? So I write those aspects, and then I have to set the budget and the deliverables, those sorts of things. Well, participant 5 is not explicitly referencing disciplinary background here. This feedback is very content focused. They talk about their expertise and they see their contribution to this joint writing. The feedback they're giving this other writer is very based on that specialized knowledge rather than something more about the form of the document itself. Taking a look at time here, Sarah, do you have a sense of how much time I'm working with? Just
You
so I
have
can
4
pace
minutes
this.
left.
Okay, thank you kindly. And I think I have a minute for this section. The last code I want to share, this I added during coding since it doesn't correspond directly to our outcomes. But one of the questions in the interview asked participants to reflect on their writing intensive education, here using the language of our course designations and of the writing intensive curriculum program. When asked this question, 4 of the 6 respondents referenced an experience outside the purview of their WI designated course. These other experiences included a Writing 2 course, which is earlier in Oregon State's course progression, not in the major, individual faculty mentorship opportunities, working at the Writing Center. This was in part surprising to me. Many of the participants actually did not remember what course they had won the Culture of Writing Award in. Since we had ostensibly contacted the interview based on winning this award and on these courses that were part of the Writing Intensive Curriculum program, I thought it was significant to see that these participants generally narrativized their writing education experience more as, in the words of participant 6, a general presence across the curriculum than as any one curricular offering, and often detached the two in their memory. This is both a nice reinforcement of the original purpose of the Culture of Writing Award, to foster that culture of writing across the university, and a nice reminder to us as WAC and WID administrators that students rarely conceptualize our programs in terms of their specific course offerings or what falls in the purview, and rather as a general presence of writing education. That's a nice transition into just 1 or 2 concluding thoughts or takeaways from these interviews. Again, the overriding takeaway is that expert writers represented here, participants, the award winners, both have a clear sense of what they are doing when they compose a genre and why they are doing it. And they often describe their composing processes with reference to the purpose or audiences of a document, or with reference to how that document or text will circulate in the world once it is written. This is probably not particularly surprising to either WAC administrators or experienced instructors of writing, since it mirrors much of the language that we use as we offer and design our courses. But I think seeing this displayed across participants' responses gives some nice empirical backing to one of the foundational assumptions in our field, and is useful in demonstrating the relevance of those assumptions when articulating them to other stakeholders. We have several other takeaways, and I've presented them here just to recap some of the different points throughout. These should be qualified with reference to the limited subject pool. While these interviews are very content rich, we did only conduct 6 of them, and they're better viewed in the context of the larger survey, which prompted the interview series.
And
Finally,
Alex,
I'd love to hear any, yeah?
You're pretty
Sorry?
much at time, so, but it seems like you're wrapping it up, so go ahead.
Well, I'd just be happy to hear any questions, comments, or suggestions about the interview data broadly, if there's time for it later. But I don't mean to talk longer than I should, so thank you for listening.
Alex, is it okay if I tell folks what you're doing next?
Yeah, sure.
Alex is coming home from Morocco to attend law school. So he's publishing a piece in written communication and then moving on to another field. But I think he's going to come home to rhetoric. I just think he's going to come home to rhetoric through the law. And he's going to be a great lawyer, of course. So while our very kind yellow lanyard person is getting me set up, oh, which you have done.
Yeah.
Um,
You can use.
Arrow keys. Okay. So I'm going to keep time on myself. So I'm Sarah Tinker-Perot, and I became director of the Writing Intensive Curriculum Program in fall of 2020, at which point Vicki and Alex invited me to join the study. And as befits my role as director, my focus is going to be on how to apply what we've learned. And so I'm going to do that regarding a key finding regarding audiences. So first, I'll talk about what we learned, and then I'll talk about applications. Before I start, I want to make a couple of land acknowledgements. Oregon State University in Corvallis, Oregon, where I live and work, is located within the traditional homelands of the Marys River or Impinafu Band of the Kalapuya, which I now can't see, but they were forcibly removed from those homelands and are survived by living descendants in the Grand Ronde and Siletz reservations today. Clemson University occupies traditional and ancestral land of the Cherokee people. And I also want to acknowledge something I've just learned, which is that the main campus is built on land seized through US military and diplomatic incursions, culminating in the Treaty of DeWitt's Corner in 1777. This is also land on which people enslaved by the Pickens, Clemson, and Calhoun families lived and worked, and it was transformed into the campus of Clemson University through convict labor. I also want to point toward the arrow key's not working. I promise you I hit the arrow key. Okay. Dr. Rhonda R. Thomas has a Call My Name project, which is recovering Black Clemson history university one story at a time. Absolutely amazing site. So just for people wanting to learn more about this area, I've been finding it really interesting. Vicki already covered the learning outcomes, so I'm not going to repeat them. The asterisk there means this information is on the handout. People on Zoom, my apologies. I meant to have a handout available to upload to you, but it didn't work out. Sorry about that. But what I want to emphasize here is the audience expectations, genres, and conventions, and I'm focusing on the audience piece. And I'm focusing on it partly because it's part of our learning outcomes, and partly just because it is a topic of perennial interest in our field. So, you know, I've got a quote here from Aristotle, 322 BCE. So I did the math on that. That's 2,345 years ago, talking about the three elements of speech making: speaker, subject, and person addressed. It's the last one, the hearer, that determines the speech's end and object. And then a quote from last year from Bleakney, Rosinski, and Moore, that literature about transfer, that literature about transfer is full of references to audiences and how students need to learn and practice strategies for analyzing and responding to new audiences and purposes for writing. I could quote from a lot of other people, right? I could quote from Liz Wardle, Josie Walweema, Dana Driscoll, Kathy Yancey, Leanne Robertson, Kara Taxak. I don't need to sell audience to this particular audience. As Vicki mentioned, we surveyed 250 alumni, got about 100 responses, 70 were complete. They came from 38 majors, 53 out of 70 said they would be interviewed. Alex heroically interviewed and transcribed with 6. The list of interviewees is there on the handout as well. 92.8% of survey respondents selected writing with your audience in mind as an aspect of writing that plays a role in their writing. Probably this isn't a surprise to any of you, that audience is considered really important. I found it very striking that not only was it high, but it tied for second with editing, and that the only area that was given more love was having strong, accurate content. Survey responses also describe having audiences as challenging and satisfying. And here's a piece that was a little surprising to me. So I'm sorry, do you think you could move Alex over to the top left side? Thank you. So one of our open-ended questions was, what aspects of writing are the most satisfying or pleasurable for you? What aspects are the most challenging? 26 people in the survey mentioned it as either satisfying or challenging. And what really stood out to me is that 19 said it was satisfying, 4 said it was challenging, 3 said it was both. Intuitively, I would have expected the other way around. So AD, the senior engineer, talked about it as challenging. Being cognizant of the target audience is the most challenging aspect of writing professionally. I have to frequently change the wording of a written document. What gets described can change drastically if I'm talking to a public citizen versus fellow engineer, project manager, or contractor. Whereas Natalie, the map seller or scholar, said in my work with maps, researching and then sharing a particular fact about a map that makes it interesting to a wider audience is always fulfilling. The survey responses also say adaptability is important. 13 people, which is 18.6%, mentioned audience, and 8 of them stress adaptability. So again, our senior engineer talks about adjusting your writing. The workforce expects you to write differently than you would with friends and peers. Edna, the data scientist, talked about learn to write technical detail for a wide variety of audiences. The CEO won't care about your really efficient code trick, but your peer definitely wants documentation on how that works. Okay. Interviews also showed that adaptability is important, partly because of the sheer range of audiences. And here again, I refer those of you in the room to the handout where we've listed all the genres described by all the participants. Here is what AD, the senior engineer, talked about. Project specification, contract language. He specifically mentioned a secondary audience of lawyers. Investigative engineering reports, which are read by engineers, by higher management, and the elected board of commissioners. Email correspondences, including with members of the public. Exhibits of projects for public open houses. Performance evaluations of team members. One of the genres that Vicky mentioned, people were kind of like, well, I wasn't ready for that one. Okay. They also talked explicitly about adapting to different audiences. So Susan, the school health and safety consultant, mentioned there's a lot I've had to learn. I think just adapting is kind of the name of the game. Edna, the data scientist, said, I write to a bunch of different audiences, so I definitely have to cater how I'm writing depending on who I expect to read this. And we saw a little bit of this language in Alex's talk when she's talking about it might be a very technical peer on my team who really wants to know why I'm using a particular Python package and why I didn't set this particular parameter in a certain way to handle nulls, to my boss's 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 boss, who needs to share it with their boss's boss about kind of the whole direction of, is this product worth anything anymore? And so on. Okay. AD, the senior engineer, also talks about his writing running the gamut from email correspondence to technical reports to contract language and the need to adapt. And I'm kind of feeling like the quotes are getting repetitive here. So for the sake of time, I'm just going to keep going. But you can see there's a lot of flexibility needed there. Right? One of the things they talked about specifically that I found interesting is how these adaptations include structure. So Edna writes in ways that multiple audiences have that executive summary at the top, followed by technical depth for technical folks. Alex also showed this quote about the boss's boss's boss and bubbling up the conclusions to the top. Natalie, I love Natalie. Natalie's the map seller who's, boss is the lawyer. I don't actually know Natalie. I love Natalie as a data source, right? Her map descriptions are framed in such a way so the most interesting bits are right at the front. And then I assume after a few hundred words that those who are just interested in flashcards will fall off. And after that, it's more of a specialized audience of really scholars and academics toward the end. Okay. They also talked about style. A quick comment, Alex mentioned that we anonymized. Noah chose to have his real name used. So if any of you end up recognizing his work and saying, hold on, they didn't anonymize him, his name is his livelihood. He said, I don't want a pseudonym. I want my name on my work. So Noah, the bird writer, distinguishes writing magazine articles and science articles. the distinction between more storytelling, whereas if it's for a scientific journal, that tends to be denser, more science-y writing style. Susan, the school health consultant, talks about the importance of being informal with school district audiences. I thought this was very interesting. She said, I have relationships across the county. I've been doing what I do for 6 or 7 years at this point as a consultant. I would actually say the informal, being too formal would be a detriment to me. You know, I work in rural Oregon. I work with people that I have a healthy working relationships with. And if I were to be too informal, that would actually be off-putting for them. Okay. Edna, the data scientist, talks about context switching style and about how she will vary it by interest and community of practice type thing. I want you to know, I've read the transcripts. Alex did not plant the concept of community of practice. She brought that in herself. And then depending on which channel in Slack I'm using, I'll definitely craft my contributions to the conversation differently. And this was interesting because she gets specific about individual readers. She says, I can have channels with my manager as well and my teammates, and that is very much catered to their personality on whatever the topic is that we're talking about. I know, this is all so cool. Okay, so what we've learned basically is, first of all, our findings align really well with the literature on the importance of audience and adaptability. So as we move forward with this project, we'll be tying it in more explicitly, but everything we're seeing says, yep, that's about as important as we've always thought it was. Second, the findings affirm the importance of audience as a learning outcome for WIC classes. We were looking to close that loop. We were looking to see if they're sending them into their futures with the right tools in their toolbox. This one, absolutely. There are also some potential applications. One is I teach the annual faculty seminar, a 5-week faculty seminar. I will absolutely be bringing these results in. 2 is faculty can use them in their classes. Being able to bring them to their students and say, hey, here's what a past graduate of this program says. It's not just me, your professor. So we're going to be doing some work this summer to bring, well, I will be. Alex is moving off to go to law school. Vicky's retired. So I'm going to be combing through and kind of picking things out that faculty in specific areas can use. And third, of course, they can influence and encourage further research. And that's where I'd like to turn my attention now. So, okay, we know that we need to help students develop both a conceptual understanding of reader-centered prose and practical experience adapting their writing for different sets of readers, right? We've got Brady, Diaz et al., Garrett et al., Yancey et al., Yancey et al., Yancey et al. I'm not just saying that because you're in the room. It's, I mean, I'm not truly, it was there already. You know, but it's especially coming up a lot in the literature about transfer, the importance of teaching students to do that adaptability, audience awareness, adaptability, metacognitive work, the reflection that requires. So that got me thinking about assignments that I have seen in my work as the WIC director. And then that got me thinking, you know, I really want to talk to these people. So I dropped a line to the IRB folks and said, I think this is exempt. You agree this is exempt, right? I'm talking to faculty. They said, yeah, it's exempt. So 6 weeks ago, I started interviewing faculty. So this is sort of the next phase in the project. So I've interviewed 5 so far, Andrea Allen, Maida Landis, Nache Barn, Rachel Kate, Von Robeson, names also on the handouts. And I also started developing a typology based on readings and interviews. A lot of what you're seeing here on this typology comes from Mary Jo Rife. Not directly, but it's inferred in a lot of her work. So what I've got here essentially is starting at the top, students writing for themselves, selves as audiences, and then moving clockwise in sort of a general progression toward more and more and more external to academia audiences. So coming around at the 10, 11 o'clock there to doing work at or for sites outside of academia. And so as I've been talking to folks in these interviews, I've been starting to just kind of categorize, okay, who is doing this, right? So for example, Rachel's students are writing for more than one teacher in a team taught class. Rachel is the engineering professor. Her students are also writing, doing work for sites outside of academia. They have client sponsors who come in and give them projects. Okay, all of them are having students write for themselves. A bunch of them are having students write for complex imagined audiences and so on. So what I'm looking at doing is to kind of enrich what I'm finding in the readings with more detailed, in-depth examples. What do you do? How do you do it? How does it work? So just a few examples. Von Robeson, Fisheries, Wildlife, and Conservation Sciences, talks about students giving a class presentation. And as part of this, he says they learn about their classmates. They perform an audience analysis where they survey their audience's knowledge, disposition, attitudes, belief, and past experiences about the specific topic they're presenting about. So he says, we teach them how to design and conduct a quick little survey, nothing too wild and crazy, but something that teases out that information. Then we provide them with a little bit of guidance for how to analyze that, and then write up the results and explain the implications for how they're going to use that information to inform their final presentation. And he talks about why. And he says, we're doing this because we want to make sure that when they're surveying their audience, there is some real stakes there. You're standing up in front of your classmates and it's all going over their heads. You don't want that. Student writing and possibly delivering to outside audiences. So the student who cried when Natche Barn presented her with the award. Natche, in some of his classes, has students write Wikipedia entries, immediate public audience. In some classes, he has students write scripts, historical stories, poems, invented nonfiction or historically based nonfiction that they actually deliver on social justice tours in the local area. The class that our participant was in was one where they wrote letters about implementing the then new statewide ethnic studies curriculum. And so about this, Natche said the target or the audience was really teachers and administrators with the K-12 level. And that was specifically because the assignment was intended to be an argument for why they needed to think about discourse around racism, not just in an additive sort of content approach than implementing ethnic studies in the K-12 system, which at that point had just recently been approved by legislation. And I asked him, did students have to send letters? He said no, but a lot of them did choose to. With the Wikipedia entries, they're doing it. They're out there. Hey, and then I think my final quote, I've completely stopped following my script, but I don't think I've skipped anything. Rachel Kate in electrical and computer engineering. I could have spent my full 20 minutes talking about Rachel and the students and what they write. And this is partly because the students in engineering do a 2 or even, in her case, 3-quarter, so year-long capstone project, often with that external client like HP, Intel, where the client will give them a project and then will give them funding for things like testing or materials. But one of the things she talks about here is how they write a project document, including a justification of design decisions that they write with complex audience concerns. They have a primary audience of each other within their team. So they are properly documenting. So they're able to move forward in the design process effectively and have well-justified decision-making processes, decision-making processes, and come to the best decisions they can, hopefully, ideally, about how to do what they need to do and understand what they need to do. And that is getting on the same page with each other, meaning within the team. But secondarily, it's also so that we as, I guess, we're sort of manager role. And by we, she means the faculty team. And also the TAs that read that as well can check their technical work. And certainly that is a project manager would be doing that after they graduate when they're in an engineering team. And then there's also a third level there is of the project partner, which I compared to a client. And so that's actually people from Intel or from HP. One of the things that Rachel talked about a lot that was interesting is how students often think that the client is interested in the product. And she keeps having to explain to them, no, they're interested in you. They're evaluating you as a potential employee. They're not going to go out and buy your product and put it on the market. They're going to recruit you. So my next steps are to continue to analyze the interviews, possibly interview more faculty. At the very least, I'd like one in each of the other colleges with undergraduate majors, forestry and education. I want to keep developing this typology, see where it goes. And then as a possible addition or a second round of interviews, I'm very curious to investigate whether faculty recognize and teach that when we construct audiences, we create not only audiences invoked, but also, to quote Lunsford and Ede, also audiences ignored, rejected, excluded, or denied. Again, not sure that fits in this phase, but I think it's something very important to be talking about as well. And with 21 seconds to go, thank you.
One question. What is the question you wish you had asked on the survey, or did you leave some out and why?
Oh, that is such a great question. What is one question we wish we'd asked on the survey? Did we leave some out and why? Neither Alex nor I were there yet, so over to you, Vicki.
Okay. I'm sure there are lots of other things we could have asked, and the survey was quite long, and all of the professional survey people at Oregon State who were giving us feedback said, that's kind of long. Are you sure you want to ask that many questions? We just can't eliminate anymore. So there probably are really good questions that we could have asked. These are the ones we decided on. And so, of course, there could be more good questions. I can't think of anything that I was sorry we cut. I think we were overwhelmed by the generosity of these respondents and by how many of them did respond, because we've been told that when graduates get emails, unsolicited emails from their institution, that they assume it's asking for money and they delete it without even opening it. And I can tell you this is true because one of the awardees is one of my sons-in-law. And I checked, has Kevin responded? No, he has not. And so I said, Kevin, did you get an email about that culture of writing? I mean, he's long out of OSU. He's way gone. And he said, oh, I don't know. I said, it was about the Culture of Writing Award that your team won in 2000, whatever. And he said, oh, Vicki, I just delete those. So anyway, I said, would you see if you still have it, or let me resend it because we'd like your response. Now, does that skew the results that I actually tracked down? One of the maybe we should subtract him from the total number, but I knew he would have interesting things to say because he and I talk about this sort of thing all the time. Okay, is there another online?
No, that's it.
Okay.
Okay. I will bring you the microphone, Josie. And then, so, yeah, she had her hand up first.
Thank you. Thank you all for a really good presentation. Vicki, as you were speaking, I was thinking, the genres that you were asking in the survey, I was thinking, this is my domain. This is technical communication. And then I began to think that one of the reasons perhaps we have these disparities is because of the silos we have. It's like writing for first years starts and stops here, and writing for professional writing starts and stops here, etc. But I was particularly intrigued with the genre of the storm drainage report. I looked it up and I thought, storm drainage. I'm sorry. Okay. I was just saying that I was intrigued by the genre of the storm drainage report,
Yes.
which I had never heard of. And I looked it up quickly and I was like, this is so good.
Oh.
I am so intrigued by the level of detail and precision that it entails and what it can get students to work with. So thank you for that.
Oh,
Yes, I'm definitely going to.
I thought it was pretty putting in because.
Yeah.
You knew.
And he was a really good, he talked a lot and really They all talked a lot. They all said really amazing things. Okay, you had your hand up next.
So first I want to say, Vicki, thank you for, because her program was always a model for George Mason. I used to write to her and say, I'm stealing so many of your ideas, including the writing awards. But also, and this is for you, Sarah, I was thinking in your work, one is that the more you look at those assignments, the more that you realize that faculty are doing really creative work across disciplines and devising assignments. And then the question I'm thinking you might want to ask is, where did you learn to write assignments like that? Yeah,
Oh, ask the faculty.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
good one.
Where did they?
Any other questions? Yes.
So I'll be asking your advice. So I teach two upper division writing, technical and professional writing. So we are doing e-portfolios, the midterm portfolio and the final portfolios. So some of the portfolios, and we also require students to draft a letter to us about reflecting their learnings. So I actually love your idea, what you have done. So how can I do these or just steal your ideas? And how can I keep track of these students when they go to their jobs? And then I want to start a similar project like you to see what they are taking with them after they graduate and what they're implementing.
Well, you're smart to think of it before they leave.
Yeah.
Because they're hard to find. And we were just very, very lucky because we had a limited number of very specific students who are the type, the award winners. They're the type to stay in touch. And we want to keep emphasizing that, we're not saying these are the representative graduates of our university, but they're still, it's useful. So we got ours. We have administrative support from an extremely industrious person with good contacts in the Alumni Association. And that's where we got most of the contacts. But if you're going to try to continue your own students, you could ask them, most of them know that they're going to lose their email as soon as they graduate. So just, I would say, get their personal, if they're willing to give it to you,
Thank
Yeah.
you.
LinkedIn, okay. Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Like what platform do you use for your portfolios? I'm just wondering if if they have access to those, if you will still have access to those to in your.
No, we usually do it like the old traditional way. They build their portfolios and put them together either on Google Doc or Microsoft Word, and they upload it to Blackboard.
Okay.
So, yeah. We're still old fashioned in that sense.
There are ways to do it.
Other questions?
1 minute left.
1 minute. Sure.
We give out awards for people in our department for students who are majors. Yes, we give out awards for students who are majors, but I think it would really be nice if we're trying to have a culture of writing on campus to extend that and to create the awareness around the institution that this is the work we do. Yeah.
And one thing I didn't mention is that I always also sent the president and the provost not only a list of the winners, but the titles of their projects, because it's dazzling to see these are undergraduates at our institution. Look what they're writing.
Definitely steal.
Okay, okay.
Vicki,
I just want to ask the last question that we're all thinking in. How do we get to be as cool as you?
Your daughter's shopping at Amazon.
That's really the question.
Thank you.
I appreciated the history of
The
place in
rhetorical.
Yay, good. Am I gonna, can I have access to the talk? I feel like it would be a good one to introduce students to the concept of rhetoric without them seeming like so ancient. I really enjoyed that.
Okay.
Yeah, I also enjoy a bit of historiography.
That's, I mean, I had to do it, you know,
Yeah,
I'm a
that's-
historian.
It makes so much
it
sense.
puts- I think it just, well, as one of my students said, once you know Plato and Aristotle, they're